Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadguru Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. So we were, today is Tuesday, so we will continue from where we left the discussion on the divine play of Srima Sharda Devi. That was the book we had decided to alternately discuss. Last time we met on Tuesday. The last Tuesday we had a talk on the Gospel of Holy Mother. So it is this Tuesday we will be. There were some Tuesdays we missed out because there was a retreat in Scotland. So we begin our regular classes now. And today being Tuesday, we will continue from where we left the discussion on Srima Sharda Devi and her divine play. Now we were discussing how Sri Ramakrishna trained her. Sri Ramakrishna, how he trained her and taught her not only spiritual ideals and ideals, but also we know that he taught her a lot of secular things as well, like how to spend wisely and how to run a household, wasting minimum things, how to, in a very thrifty way, how to manage a household. So that kind of training, she lived with Sri Ramakrishna and spent nearly 7 months in Kamarpukur. So by example, not just by giving advice, Sri Ramakrishna taught her the essentials of not only spiritual life, but how a spiritual life has to be lived in the world. So that was Sri Ramakrishna's training during his 7 months stay in Kamarpukur. Normally he would be staying in Dakshineshwar, but he had gone to Kamarpukur as we saw last time. And Srima Sharda was very young at that time, was very unhappy that finally they had to part. And it was not after some more years that she could get an opportunity to go and live with Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineshwar. So Swami Sharadanandji writes about the transformation that took place in Ma Sharda Devi after living with her husband. So this is what Swami Sharadanandji writes in his great master. He says, by the time the master left Kamarpukur for Calcutta a few months later, Sarada was endowed with an infinite wealth of joy that she carried back to Jairambati with her. We can easily guess that this blissful experience had effected a transformation. This is noteworthy that before that and after staying with Sri Ramakrishna for nearly 7 months, there was such a transformation which could be seen in all her movements, speech, conduct, and how she worked. Some kind of spiritual maturity or even how to deal with people. So some wonderful pieces of advice Sri Ramakrishna gave her. How? Because he knew that she had to do much more than what he was destined to do. She was much younger in age, and obviously he expected Srima Sharda Devi, the divine play of Srima Sharda Devi, to continue longer. And we see how for 34 years almost, it was Srima Sharda Devi who held aloft the torch of spirituality, which was handed over to her by Sri Ramakrishna. He had trained her for that and had given instructions, just as he gave instructions to Swami Vivekananda and trained him to spread the message to the Western world. It was Holy Mother who was trained by him not only trained by him, but instructed by him through, I mean, he foretold many things that she would have had to do in the future after his Mahasamadhi. Though she was not she was reluctant. She even remarked that I am a woman, how can I do all these things? In those days, it was unimaginable that a woman would be the spiritual guide for innumerable people, both men and women. There were a few monasteries or maybe a few organizations, very small organizations, where women, I don't think there were many organized. Gaurima was one, but she had not started an organization. It was only after she met Holy Mother and got the inspiration. She was leading the life of a wandering nun. But nuns normally did not start monasteries or rarely became the head of spiritual monasteries, leave alone a big order like Sri Ramakrishna Sangha. So the order of Sri Ramakrishna was nurtured, guided and molded by Srima Sharda Devi, and that was the task that was accomplished. Sri Ramakrishna had already started training her. So for these 7 months, she spent in Kamarpukur before Sri Ramakrishna left for Calcutta, was a period of training, the initial period of training. Of course, after she came to Dakshineshwar at a very young age, so that training continued till Sri Ramakrishna's Mahasamadhi. And finally, he, before his passing away into Mahasamadhi, instructed her and said, take care of these children, these people, especially the devotees of Calcutta who are struggling in the world. He used that language. He said, they are just struggling like a worm is struggling to survive. So that was the condition of most of the people. It was not just physical poverty or the poverty that was a result of the colonial rule of the British Empire that impoverished the state of Bengal especially, but all over India, along with the economic poverty, there was a kind of a lack of enthusiasm even in spiritual matters, and many things, many sectarian quarrels were very commonplace in those days, and people were quarreling, and so many fanatical movements both within Hinduism and those that were introduced by the foreign powers that ruled us, the foreign colonies, I mean the colonial masters, as well as before that the Mughals had come. So there was a lot of uh, there were a lot of problems, issues, and people were slowly losing faith in the capacity of religion to transform human lives. So that was the condition, and it had come to an extreme point. That is why in the Gita, Sri Krishna says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharatam. And whenever there is glani, means whenever there is some kind of chaos or commotion because of lack of understanding of the core spiritual values of any religion, the incarnation has to come. Not to preach something new, but try to revive and emphasize the essentials of religion, of spirituality, the core values which are diluted, or maybe people start trivializing those ideals, and religion ceases to have any impact or hold on the lives of people. A positive effect, transformative effect has to be is very often found that a positive effect, some kind of transformation, which should be the result of proper practice of spirituality or religion, is found missing. So the incarnations have to come, and they have to play out their divine drama or the divine play as it is known. So that is why we are discussing how Sri Ramakrishna on Sundays we discuss the great master, the divine play of Sri Ramakrishna, and now on Tuesday we discuss the divine play of Srima Sharda Devi, how they complemented each other. In fact, she survived Sri Ramakrishna and lived for 34 years more. So all her movements, speech, conduct, and how she worked, even the minute details of how a Vedantist or practical Vedanta should be practiced in the household was taught to her by Sri Ramakrishna, not only by his teachings or not only by speaking to her about those ideals, but living them himself. So after observing him, and Swami Shardananji says that there was a wonderful, blissful experience that he shared with her. And that bliss or joy, spiritual joy, which she inherited from Sri Ramakrishna, she spread all over the world. Because Sri Ramakrishna was sure that he would not be living for long. That's why we find there's a huge difference in their age. So he wanted Srima Sharda Devi to carry on the mantle of spirituality, being a spiritual consort. So the divine drama continued even after 1886 till 1920, almost 34 years. Now, Swami Shardanji says she was now gentle but not fickle. You see, gentle people are sometimes very often very fickle-minded. They are gentle not because they choose to. They are forced to by society. They become gentle because they don't have the capacity to fight. Very often, gentle people are seen to be goody people, as we call them. They do not fight, they do not quarrel because they don't have the capacity to do so. That is totally different. To be gentle but at the same time be strong and not fickle minded. That is the hallmark of a spiritual person. A spiritual person may be gentle, but he is never fickle or fickle minded. He has a very strong mind and he chooses to be gentle in life, in all matters, and because he holds on to higher values from a position of strength, not from a position of weakness. So when Jesus said, be gentle like a lamb, he didn't mean that you should have those quality of lambs which are sheepish. We should not be sheepish in our behavior, but lamb-like, or the gentleness of a lamb, when it is practiced from a position of strength, then we are no longer like sheep. The sheep, if we see the quality, be gentle like a lamb, even Jesus used to say, that doesn't mean one should be weak like a lamb. One should be strong like a lion, but gentle like a lamb. So Swami Shardanji then adds, he says, she was thoughtful but not impertinent. And her love was not blinded by selfishness. Normally, human love, the way we practice it, the way we understand it, the way we see it around us in the world, is motivated by some kind of selfishness. I love my child, I love my family, I love my country. So that love is blinded, or partially blinded at least, by some kind of selfishness, which is at the root of that love. But her love was not blinded by selfishness. Moreover, Swami Shardananji says her experience had the spiritual experiences she had, and the time she spent, nearly 7 months with Sri Ramakrishna, had eradicated all kinds of worldly desires from her heart. This is very important. So Holy Mother used to say, what happens when one becomes spiritual? Does he grow 2 horns, or does he develop some powers? No. The desires from the mind become less and less. That is a hallmark or a sign of spirituality. First is one becomes unselfish and one starts really genuinely loving others, not out of some kind of selfishness, but from pure motivated by pure unselfishness. So unselfish love is one of the important qualities which a spiritual person has, acquires as he grows spiritually. And the second is all the worldly desires, except the desire for mukti or spiritual progress, all the other desires, they become less. And as a result, all selfish desires vanish, but unselfish desires, which result in true compassion. So Swami Shardanji says, it gradually transforms these two qualities, absence of any worldly desire in the heart and absence of love not tainted with selfishness. These two qualities gradually transformed Holy Mother, who had not yet attained the age of 18. She was much smaller at that time, much younger than that. So it transformed her into an embodiment of compassion. Karunamai, as in Sanskrit, the word used for compassion is known as Karuna. And she was one who possessed this Karuna. She was Karunamai. That is how they describe Holy Mother. Due to this influence of inner bliss, the inner joy, she often said, when I was in the company of Sri Ramakrishna, we all of us felt, at least she felt, that there was a picture of joy, which was the fountain of bliss was always coming out of that pitcher from which was in the heart. I mean, she felt as if a pitcher is of joy, uh, which is overflowing with bliss, was placed in the heart. So she says, I never felt morose or depressed or any other depressive feelings were not there whenever she was in the company of Sri Ramakrishna. And after that also she said, I always felt that a picture of bliss was there in my heart. So no matter how much she suffered outwardly, there was a lot of physical suffering and because of her relatives. So due to this influence of this inner bliss, she neither felt any physical suffering nor was she disappointed if the loving care she gave to her relatives was not reciprocated. Normally, when you love somebody, you at least expect some kind of gratitude. You may not expect love in return, but the people who shower their love do so much for the near and dear ones. They at least expect that a few words of kindness. Of course, a mother and father do love their children because of the attachment they have. But even then, they still expect. It is not totally unselfish. Though mother's love can be very unselfish, but at the same time, she expects at least some gratitude, some but from other people, there is a tendency for worldly people to expect them to reciprocate in some way or the other. But as Holy Mother's nature, as per her nature, she was content in every respect and absorbed within herself. She was absorbed in the joy she found within, so she did not need external joy. So she was content with whatever was uh, destined in her life, destined to happen in her life, whether she had to face poverty, whether she had to face physical pain. These things did not distract her, because one of the main signs of spirituality is that one is absorbed within oneself. So that is why Sri Ramakrishna used to call that it is Atma Rama. Atma Rama means one who is happy to be living to oneself, to one absorbed in oneself, absorbed within oneself. So that is what is. So that is what Swami Shardananji says. Swami Shardananji says that her mind was always in a high state of mind. So she was content in every respect, and that made her and that made her not only content, but she felt she didn't even she passed her days in her father's house. When after Sri Ramakrishna left Kamarpukur, she went to Jairam Bhati, and though she was living there, her mind was with the master at Dakshineshwar, because this was the first contact she had with Sri Ramakrishna. She lived for such a long time after her marriage. This was the first time that she had lived for such a long time with him, and the joy she felt and in his holy company, in his spiritual company, was uh, such a wonderful joy that missed she missed his company, and she was feeling an intense desire to see the master and be with him, but she carefully controlled herself. Though this desire was very strong to go to Dakshineshwar, she was patient enough. Patience and perseverance is also a hallmark of spiritual life. So she controlled herself and waited patiently. She believed that since the master had graciously loved her so much at their first meeting, he would not forget her. She knew that once she was in his company for so many months, and he would not definitely forget to take her to Dakshineshwar whenever the right time, whenever he felt that the right time had arrived. So she felt that when the right time arrived, he would call her to him. Thus the days passed one after another as she waited for that auspicious day, all the while holding to her firm faith within. So, anyway, union and separation are part of human life. The joy of union is intensified a thousandfold, they say, after a long period of separation and intense longing. So, mental union is higher than physical union. Physically, you may not be with a person, but the spiritual union is even higher than mental union. So, spiritually, she was unified with her master, who was a spiritual consort. So, even if the mind sometimes felt a little desolate, she missed that holy company, not only physically but also mentally. But that was overcome because the spiritual union that she experienced, the joy of spirituality that Sri Ramakrishna had created in her heart. So that was much higher than the physical or mental union which she had experienced when he was in Kamarpukur. She was interacting with him physically and also mentally. But the spiritual union overpowered everything else. And though she was staying with her father, she found she didn't miss that. So, while one thing we have to notice that when we study the lives of avatars, we find that for a certain period of their lives, they were separated from spiritual concerts. If you see the other incarnations, not just Sri Ramakrishna, but the other incarnations, Rama was separated from Sita when Sita was forcibly taken away by Ravana. Rama was separated, so he had to spend a lot of time uh, separated from Sita. Then we find even Krishna, once he finished the Vrindavan Leela, uh, he left the gopis and never returned back to Vrindavan. So the pangs of separation which our gopis, especially Radha, felt were so intense that, and he never came back to Vrindavan. That is rather strange. So even Buddha left his house. He had a small child, and one day he decided to leave his palace and go into the forest. And it was long after he had attained illumination, that somehow he agreed Yashodhara could embrace sannyasa and join the order that he had founded. So for many years, Yashodhara with the child Rahul, they could not even meet Buddha. So this separation is very common. So Rama was separated from Sita, Krishna from Radha, Buddha from Yashodhara, and even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who took sannyas, and he had to uh, he did not live with his wife Vishnu Priya, who was he had married all of these incarnations, Rama, Krishna, Buddha and Chaitanya had married. They also had married, but most of them had, there was a phase in their lives, in the lives of all incarnations, where there was some kind of separation. Now, is there any meaning to it? Now, Swami Sharadanand is trying to find out why these things happen. Why do the spiritual concerts, especially when incarnations come, when they, most of them, except for some incarnations like Christ, who never married, Shankaracharya, and some other great teachers, obviously they did not marry. But most of the other incarnations, though they married, they practically lived separate lives, especially Holy Mother. She was so close, I mean, close in the sense living in Nahabat, which is in Dakshineshwar, and Sri Ramakrishna used to live in his room. A lot of visitors used to come, Sri Ramakrishna used to sing. So many things happened. But she was living hardly a few feet away, but they could never meet each other, very rarely. In those days, women were not seen whenever the talk was going on in the Sri Ramakrishna's room. She used to just go once or twice a day to uh, give him food. But even that, some other women devotees used to uh, take that privilege from her. But she never complained. She was always happy, because Sri Ramakrishna had taught her that to remain absorbed within the spiritual core which is within, if one is absorbed within, then one does not have any kind of loneliness in life. It is aloneness. There's a huge difference between loneliness and aloneness. Aloneness is a matter of choice. One prefers to live alone because one is happy with his own self. It is only when we don't touch the inner self that we seek happiness outside, and unfortunately, our heart gets broken, because when we try to seek happiness outside, it is always changing. We try to grab and hold on to something which is not permanent, which is not of a permanent nature. And when that thing goes away from us, we feel sorry. So we try to grab, like a desperate person when he's sinking, he tries to grab whatever branch or twig, whatever branch of a tree he gets, just to prevent himself from drowning. But then if the weight of the person is so strong, the current is so strong, that the branch breaks and he flows with the flow of water. So that is what these great incarnations, when they came, they showed how to live, especially when the pangs of separation are felt. Because they were born in a human body, naturally, Swami Sharadanji says, they also feel the same pain, the same pleasure as normal human beings feel. Not that because they are incarnations, they don't feel that. They feel. Even Rama wept when Sita was taken away. So we find in the Ramayana and all other uh, uh, lives of divine incarnations, we find that they assume all the human characteristics just to show they are free people, but at the same time, they have a role to play. It is called the divine play. That is why we call everything Chaitanya Charitamrita, or the divine play of Sri Chaitanya, divine play of Leela Prasanga, as it is known. So it is a play, no doubt, but they suffer from the same problems, same tribulations, same trials, which normal human beings feel, but they show the way out. So that's why this separation, this long separation, she was married for so many years, she could not even go to Dakshineshwar. And after going to Dakshineshwar also, they hardly met each other. But she was not at all sad, or that did not cause any problems for her, because Sri Ramakrishna had taught her how to live. That's why Swami Vivekananda describes Sri Ramakrishna as Atma Rama. He always used to call him as an Atma Rama. Even the relics and the ashes on Snan Yatra day in Belur Math, they worship the relics. They call it Atma Ramer Kauta, means a receptacle in which the relics, the ashes and the bones, etc. of Sri Ramakrishna are preserved and they are worshipped. So that has been given a name Atma Rama. Atma Ramer Kauta means he never called his guru by name. He used to call him Atma Rama, means one who is immersed in the joy of the inner self. He doesn't require anybody to make him happy. So also he shared the same quality with Srima Sharda Devi. Though they were living very close to each other, it hardly mattered if they met each other or not. So physical contact or even mental contact was not necessary. Each one was doing one's own duty and happy. So that was a kind of spiritual union which Swami Shardanandji says. So Swami Shardanji is asking this question: is there a meaning to this separation? Why Rama was separated from Sita for such a long time? Krishna in fact never met Radha. For a very, very long time he did not return. And perhaps but he was so close with all the gopis when he was a young child, especially till the age of 14. But once he crossed 14 and when she left Vrindavan, it was for good. He never came back. So he was not attached. So here Swami Shardanji says, we don't know whether there is a deeper meaning to all this, but it is perhaps, he says, it's a part of the divine play to teach humanity how to be detached from their family ties and shun attachment, because that is at the root of all our suffering. It's not our it is not the behavior of other people that makes us suffer. It is our attachment to those people. Now people around Holy Mother, her own brothers, were so desperate trying to grab property. They were fighting with each other. So many worldly people were surrounding her, but she was never disturbed. So how to live in this life and be detached from all the family? Though she was living in the family, she did not give up anybody. There were so many people. That mad Radhu was there. She was creating so much trouble for Holy Mother, but she did not renounce her. She lived with her, but at the same time, she was not attached. So Shardananji says, in the 26 years of their married life, because Sri Ramakrishna passed away at the age of 50. So Sri Ramakrishna lived with Sarada in Kamarpukur, Jairambati, first in Kamarpukur where she went, stayed for 7 months, but then Sri Ramakrishna came back. Then she went in Jairambati. Sometimes he used to go to Jairambati, Dakshineshwar, then Shampukur, where he was shifted before going to Kashipur for about 6 months. But the total period, Sri Ramakrishna and Srima Sharda Devi lived in each other's company was approximately only 10 years. Though she lived for 34 years after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, and all her spiritual ministration, all her guiding all these people, all the disciples and initiating them, that happened after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna. So that is why there is a verse which Swami Chaitanand is quoting from Rig Veda. He says, one has to just keep moving, to march along Charayveti. Charayva iti means keep on moving, don't stop. But there will be a lot of obstacles, but one has to march alone. So that famous song of Rabindranath Tagore, when he wrote that beautiful song, Ekla Chalo Re, mane just walk alone. This journey, we have been born alone and we will die. One day when we die, we will die alone. We are not going to take anything away with us. All our near and dear ones, everything will be left behind. So to march alone is to gain immortality. That is the key principle of spiritual life. One may live with everybody, but our journey is a journey which has to be lived alone. So marching by oneself is the sweet fruit of the journey. That is what Rigveda says. The Rigvedic rishis said, look at the sun, the ever glorious and eternal traveler, who once having started on his journey has never felt drowsy. So these Vedic rishis, they used to look at the natural phenomena around us in nature and find that even the sun does not require any company. It just goes on round, and it goes in the earth goes round the sun. The sun never bothers about anything. It's marching alone. So hence, a traveler learns something from the sun, and Be like that eternal traveler. I mean, the sun and the other stars, they're all so far from each other, so apart from each other, but they are happy. They're just following the course which uh, they have to follow, and they just travel alone. So the sweet fruit of the journey can be found only if one marches alone, happy with oneself. So that aloneness gives you joy, whereas loneliness can be miserable, because we try to remove our loneliness by mixing with people who very often either they don't like our company, or even if they like our company, they are somehow destiny separates them from us. So we feel sorrow because we have placed all our joy or hopes and we are on these people or things or other uh, things in society, which are we feel sad when these things are taken away from us. So that's why it says, the Rig Veda says, hence, O traveler, just march alone. So if you remember, we once spoke about the famous sutra which is based on a rhinoceros. A rhinoceros is an animal with the one horn. Normally, all the animals have two horns, but the rhino has one horn. So one day, Bhagwan Buddha saw that, and he got so much inspiration that he was undertaking a journey trying to search for nirvana, and he was looking for some inspiration. But seeing the rhino, he wrote a long poem which I've shared on WhatsApp with all of you. There he says the greatness of this rhino, though rhinos live in a colony, but sometimes they, not sometimes, most of the time, they prefer to wander alone. So he says, be like a rhino, one pointed. Even the horn of a rhino is single. It's not uh, uh, diverted from his or his path. It just marches alone in the grasslands. If you go to Assam, you will find these rhinos moving alone. So that is the idea. Swami Shardanji says, Sri Ramakrishna taught Srima Sharda Devi from a very young age how to undertake a spiritual journey in the company of everybody, but like a practical Vedantist, live alone, absorbed in the joy of the self. Once you touch that source of joy within, then you will find that there is a great joy in marching alone. So that is the significance of this solitude. Solitude, or maybe you can say this separation. So Swami Shardan is trying to answer why this separation, long separation in all the lives, all the incarnations. We find 14 years Rama could not meet Sita. So why these things are so common in Buddha also? Buddha's life, only after his enlightenment he came back, and because the disciples of Buddha insisted, Yashodhara was taken into the order and she was also given sannyas. So the monk, she became a nun. But there was practically no contact, though he was married and even had a small child. So this kind of uh, traveling, spiritual traveling, or as it is known, by following the Rig Vedic dictum Charai Veti, just march on, was what Srima Sharda Devi experienced during her 7 months in the company of Sri Ramakrishna. So along with spiritual training, he also gave her other kinds of training, how to lead a very frugal life, because they had very little means, physical means. So how not to spend money, how to save money, how to run a household on a very small budget, how to how to behave with people, the interpersonal relationships. So all these minor things which are part of our life and which is a result of proper practice of spirituality was taught to Sri Ramakrishna, taught to Srima Sharda Devi even from a very young age. So that's why they say the more often gold is rubbed with a touchstone, the more it glitters. A fire burns more brightly when the wood is stirred, and a snake raises its hood high to bite when it is struck. If somebody beats a snake, it is quietly going, but if going following its own path. But if somebody tries to disturb him, then it raises its hood. So, and gold, if you rub it more with a touchstone, it glitters more. All the coating or the layer of dirt goes away. And fire also, if you stir the wood, then it burns brightly. So that's why when a human soul awakens, when a lot of trouble, when a person is challenged, if things are very smooth, then one does not turn to spirituality. That's the idea. That doesn't mean we have to look for trouble, but trouble very often uh, challenges a person to find a permanent solution to the problems of life. So he realizes that I have been just running here and there to this person, that person, with the hope that my problems will be solved. But they don't happen because we have to get that source. The solution is often lying within. Because we have not focused our attention within, we try to do some kind of patchwork and solve our problems. It helps, no doubt. Some people may help for some time, but ultimately one has to help oneself. But these experiences, these painful experiences, as Swamiji says, I've learned more from pain than from pleasure. Pleasure has not taught many lessons to me, but it is pain that often gave me some spiritual insight into the true nature of the world, so that I can become strong, spiritually strong, and face them. So, enduring the lives of the divine women who accompanied the avatars, that is what Shardananji is saying here. The lives of the divine women who accompanied the avatars in every age, if you see, including that of Sita. In fact, one author says uh, Sita's life was more glorious than Rama's life, because she had to pass through all the tribulations and problems, and she very bravely faced it. So somebody has suggested, why not name it Sitayana? Why Ramayana? Because she is the central character. So all the divine women, especially in this incarnation, Srima Sharda Devi outlived, she lived for nearly 34 years after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna. And for widows, those whose husband had died in those days, especially the poverty that she faced and the trials and tribulations she had to undergo for 34 years after the passing away of her husband, was known only to her. And they were full of, the avatars, the women who accompanied them, normally they had to face the brunt. But in this incarnation, Shardananji says, she not only emerged triumphant, but she was an object lesson to all the women. If that's why he says, Swami Vivekananda says, none of you have understood the significance of Ma Sharda Devi's incarnation. In this age, she has come. She is more prominent than the male counterpart. In all other incarnations, for example, Rama, Krishna, Chaitanya, their wives were not so important. Of course, Sita was a wonderful character, and she is not given her due. Most of the authors, they say it was Maryada Purushottam and all those things. But what about Sita? She was a very greatly empowered woman. So also you will find in the lives of others, though most of them led very quiet lives. We hardly know what happened to Vishnu Priya, who was Chaitanya's wife. And she definitely was a spiritual person, and she lived a wonderful spiritual life, but that is not highlighted because most of them passed away and the male counterparts lived longer. Whereas here you find Sri Ramakrishna gives the whole responsibility of carrying on the spiritual tradition to Holy Mother. Just with, according to Swamiji, the reason why he did was to establish the power of women in this century, this age. In this age, he said, none of you have understood the significance of Ma Sharda's advent. To show to the world what a spiritually empowered woman can do. What is true spiritual empowerment, especially for women? That was the goal of Sri Ramakrishna's incarnation. And he brought with him Ma Sharda and trained her so that the whole world can learn lessons how to overcome suffering, not only suffering, enduring all forms of hardships. She demonstrated this. Wives of the consorts, normally they demonstrate how to overcome suffering through strength of will and how to surrender to providence and still not be content with whatever they get, whatever fate destines for them. So suffering on top of suffering made the divinity of those great women shine forth. That is why in the Indian tradition, we, most of the Indians, unlike the other religious traditions, we pay more respect to Shakti, or the female counterpart of God. That is why very often we say the name, we often see the name Lakshmi Narayan being uttered. We don't never say Narayan Lakshmi. It is Lakshmi first, then Narayana. And Sita Ram. Ram Sita we don't say. We say Sita Ram because Sita is given more importance than Rama. And then also Krishna. We don't say Krishna Radha. Radha Krishna, Sita Ram, Gauri Shankar. So all these names in our Indian culture, they begin with the Shakti, or the female counterpart of God, first. So it may sound poetic, sweet, and melodious when the name of Shakti comes first. It's not just for the sound quality that they are pronounced like that. We had a great tradition where women were honored, Shakti was honored, and to revive that aspect of motherhood of God, the Shakti aspect of divinity, the female aspect of divinity, and uh, Sri Ma Sharda Devi was born, and Sri Ramakrishna trained her for that role. As Swamiji says, she was the center around which women of the modern age, even in those days and even in the future, he said, she will be the role model around which women will be learning what true empowerment is. Women's empowerment is not just competing with men for jobs, and economic and social empowerment is always taking place now. It has taken place, it had started in the early 20th century. We found that so many women activists like Betty Friedan, even in the UK, people were fighting for their rights. They did not even have voting rights. So a great movement was started in the West, but people don't realize that we had a tradition much before these women's empowerment movement started in the West. In the East, unfortunately, because of the foreign rule, especially the Mughals and the British, when they came and conquered India, women were reduced to secondary citizens. But if you see the Vedic age, they were at par with men. They even earned money. They were. You will find instances where they had access to knowledge. In fact, when Rama was asked to go to the forest, the women of the palace came because they were now they wanted to decide who will rule in his absence. He said, I am anyway going because my father, I have to fulfill the promise. So 14 years, who will rule? Lakshmana refused. He said, I am going with Rama. Bharata was not there, and even if he was there, the women, all the women, that shows how empowered women were, even in the Ramayana, the period when Ramayana took place. So they come and they request Dasharatha. I said, make Sita the ruler of Ayodhya because she is capable. They even argue. They said, in what way is she inferior to Rama? Of course, she does not accept. She says, where if my husband goes to the forest, I just follow him. That was a different issue. But there was a proposal by other women who thought Sita was as capable as any other man in the kingdom, who had the knowledge, who had all the qualities of a ruler. So that women's empowerment was there in the Vedic age. But unfortunately, we find that so many years of Mughal rule, where slowly women were reduced to second grade citizens. That's the impact of foreign cultures uh, on our land. So that idea to revive the power of Shakti is one of the reasons why Sri Ramakrishna was born. The divine play of Sri Ramakrishna should be understood in the light of the divine play of Sri Ma Sharda Devi. Then we understand the import, why she lived for 34 years more and with such strength and such power of conviction and spirituality. So, although we find that the life stories of these avatars, spiritual consorts, especially the female counterparts, are full of pain and suffering, still the love they have for their husbands, in a spiritual sense, not in a physical sense, it is unparalleled. They represent the ideal of womanhood. That is what Swamiji says. Their lives were brightened by their love, purity, the unselfish love, not expecting anything from anybody, purity, patience, forbearance, contentment, and service, self control and renunciation, devotion and faith. Just as men need these qualities, the monks need. Even the spiritual concerts, or they have to exhibit these qualities of what a nun is supposed to have: the gratitude, the unselfishness, and the voluntary poverty. After the passing of Sri Ramakrishna, he had made some arrangement so that a little money would go to her for her maintenance. But even that was stopped by the selfish relatives, 7 rupees per month. But she never complained. She never went and asked anybody. She somehow managed a household. She grew her own vegetables, and with a little rice she got, she somehow stayed in a state of abject poverty without complaining, full of joy for many years, till somebody discovered and saw the mischief behind stopping her little allowance she was getting. It was her own relatives which did that. But they don't give up this austerity and spirit of sacrifice for humanity. And they show that reliance on God is the best way to address the problems. They were established in their own greatness, these Shaktis, whoever came with the incarnations. And but through their greatness and glory, by virtue of these noble qualities, they demonstrated before the world what a true life of practical Vedanta can be lived. So from 1867 to 1871, after Sri Ramakrishna went back to Dakshineshwar, Sarada lived with her parents in Jairambati and continued to serve her relatives, her two brothers, and it's a big joint family. 4 years passed, 67 to 71. And though her body was in Jairambati, her mind dwelled on the sweet memories of the master, the wonderful time she spent in Kamarpukur, in the spiritual company of, and by this time, she was 18 years old. Now she had grown up. Normally, this was the age when, though they were married at a very young age, at the age of 18, they would normally join their husbands. That was the social custom in those days. So every day, now after the age of 18, partly because there were so many gossip mongers in Jairambati who were criticizing. That is how society is. They were criticizing unnecessarily whenever she was going to take a bath in the other women would say, see, she is married to a madcap who is not even caring for her. He is living in Dakshineshwar and she is living here. So naturally, when these people were carrying out that gossip, she expected that at least at some stage a message will come from Sri Ramakrishna and I will go and live there in Dakshineshwar. Sometimes she would think to herself, he was so kind to me during our last meeting 4 years ago when he was here 7. How can he forget me? She knew he has definitely not forgotten her. In good time, he will of his own accord call me to his side. But let me wait patiently for that moment. So she was not unnecessarily disturbed, though there was a lot of talk going on and all those things. But even her mother was very noble. They did not insist that she should go. There is a saying that gossip spreads faster than the gospel. Most of the people, there's a famous saying which says the gospel or the good things don't spread so fast. Gossip spreads fast. In the absence of any word from her husband, she became a victim of terrible village gossip, especially in rural India. You will find this gossip breaks hearts and ruins several lives. Ordinary people would have been broken if you constantly hear something bad, and this gossip, even the best, strongest people succumb to that. Its victims are helpless, and it causes innocent people to pass sleepless nights and makes them cry, literally cry. So reports came, wrong reports obviously, from Dakshineshwar. Many people superficially seeing Sri Ramakrishna absorbed in his divine puja, and they thought he was mad or he had gone mad, and they were very quick to spread the word that her husband has totally become mad, is dead, and because they did not see Sri Ramakrishna like other men running after money, running after wealth, running after whenever you show spiritual qualities, people think you're not normal, because normally the whole world runs after these things. So naturally, the villagers mistook Sri Ramakrishna's God intoxicated state for some kind of insanity. Otherwise, even Hriday, his nephew, served him so well. Once one Marwadi came and said, you see, I just want to make a deposit of 10,000 rupees, in which was a big amount in those days. 10,000 rupees in your name, so that with that interest you can live peacefully and do your sadhana. So he just offered, not once, twice. When he uttered it for the third time, Sri Ramakrishna got terribly angry. He said, you have come here to tempt me, and took a stick and was literally going to beat him. He said, you just leave this place. I don't want your money. So hearing this, Hriday was terribly upset. He said, uncle, what are you doing? He is coming here with the offer of some money, and after all, we will be using it for other people also. Why did you refuse him? So, hearing all these, which normally no worldly people would refuse such a gift. But anyway, the rumors were there. The villagers who used to visit, they heard from Hriday and other people that he is simply refusing anything. He doesn't touch money. How will he live? And all those gossip. And he said he is mad. So that worried, that gossip worried. So at the bathing ghat, the village women chatted and gossiped. One woman even pointed at Sarada and said, there goes the madman's wife. So other women started mocking her with sympathy. Oh, poor Shama Sundari, she has married her daughter to a madman. How sad. Like that, they were just making fun. So that is why this, in spite of the rumors, even at home she had no peace. Even her own mother, sometimes hearing all the lament and gossip, she said, oh, I don't know why he's not taking you to the Dakshineshwar. I think what these people say uh, is really, perhaps it may be true. Though she was a very noble lady, but hearing the gossip of all the people around her. So Holy Mother Sarada was stung by these remarks and avoided these people as much as she could. But she can't avoid, whenever she passed through, these people so senselessly started gossiping. But she kept herself busy with household duties, serving her mother and other relatives, and also meditating. And when it was, I mean, the right time, she knew there were some nice personalities. Aunt Bhanu Pishi, as they call Aunt Bhanu, there were some very good people who sympathized with her and consoled her, saying that we all know Sri Ramakrishna is a great person. You don't worry, don't listen to these people. So they used to come now and then and help to, they console her and tell her not to take this gossip seriously. So Srima Sharda Devi later on said, referring to this difficult time, she used to say that how she handled all these problems, this gossip. He says, one must always be busy with work. Work keeps both the body and the mind in good shape. During my younger days at Jairam Bhatti, she says, I was so active day and night and did not visit anyone's house. So if I ever did, I heard people say, oh, Shama's daughter has been married to a madman. So I avoided people and just kept myself busy, and that's how my mind was peaceful and joyful, even in spite of all these things. So she used to advise younger women and others disciples that remember in spiritual life one has to be always busy and focus on the task at hand, doing it with the spirit of karma yoga, so that you are insulated from the evil influences of other people. The best way, either you meditate or you work hard, do your work sincerely, or go to sleep. In fact, Latu Maharaj, one of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, used to say, if you have no work, nothing to do, don't be in the company of others when, if especially if there is some gossip. You just better go and sleep. Sleep is much better than having evil company and listening to all sorts of things. So this training which she got from her husband when he was there in Kamarpukur was so useful, because he used to always advise her to do the right thing at the right time, always keep oneself busy. That's why we find even at a very old age, though she had rheumatism and so many problems of the knee, she was found to be working. Just a few years before her death, when she was totally full of pain, but still she did not stop just to be an object lesson. And she used to tell the women who told her to take some rest, he said, no, if the mind should never be allowed to remain idle. So, this part phase of her life before she finally goes to Dakshineshwar, which we will discuss in the next class, shows very clearly how the spiritual training she got for 7 months before she came back to Jairambati, and then after some time she got a chance. We will see how it happened and how she finally decided, took a decision, and with her father, she managed to go to Dakshineshwar to live with Sri Ramakrishna. So that we will, of course, she used to now and then come back to her home in Jairambati or sometimes come back to Kamarpukur even while he was alive. But most of the time later on, after 71, for many years she lived in Dakshineshwar, and that was a golden period where she was fully trained to take over his mantle and continue the spiritual ministration which Sri Ramakrishna had started. So we'll end the talk today, and if there are some questions you can just ask, otherwise I'll close. Yeah, there's one small question. I think it is Sharon. Was Sri Sri Ma's complete identification with Thakur since Shodashi Puja or later, after his Mahasamadhi, during and after Pilgrim? We cannot say for certain, because you see, these identification, she was identified even before she was, just after she was born. When Sri Ramakrishna was asked, he said, my spiritual consort or my wife is already there. Why are you looking here and there? Go to Jairambati, you will find. So naturally, this divinely arranged marriage itself was an indication that they were to carry out this divine play together, though there was a huge age difference between them. But still, everything was pre-planned. So you can't say that from this point onwards, she was completely in tune with her spiritual consort, because right from beginning, from day one, you will find, especially after the 7 months that we see, Shodashi Puja was the culmination. That was when Sri Ramakrishna understood that now he has to leave this world. It was in 72. So hardly after that, of course, he lived for a long time, but this was an indication that now he is passing on the mantle to Srima Sharda Devi. But at no point of time, though they did not live with each other physically, she was in Jairambati, he was in Kamarpukur, sometimes mostly in Dakshineshwar, though they were not in touch with each other physically or even, but mentally and spiritually, they were always one. So I don't think you can point out that after this period or after this incident, she identified herself. She was always identified. She knew the role that she had to play in life. She was trained by Sri Ramakrishna for that. So there's no specific date or time. Okay? I'll end now. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.